The movie begins with John driving someone in a car in the middle of the night. The man shouts that he can't breathe and asks John to hurry up. Before we find out what happened, I'll tell you the background of the last 3 years. John and his wife and family friends are having dinner together at a restaurant. They talk about whether men can work for men and women for women. It would seem an ordinary conversation, but it ends with an unpleasant quarrel between Laura and another girl. They decide to disperse as soon as possible and come home, where a child is already waiting for them, getting ready for bed. John and Laura are madly in love with each other and seem to fall in love even more over the years. John works as a literature teacher at school. Laura goes to the bathroom and gives herself an injection of insulin. Together they discuss everyday issues, joking and smiling. A good start to the day is the key to success. Laura notices a bloodstain on her coat and goes to the bathroom to make sure she didn't imagine it. When she starts to wash the blood from her coat, the police break into the house, who say that she is guilty of someone's death. The son is crying, and the father is being held by the police, and after a few minutes no one but John and his son is already at home. One night, Luke screams in fear and his father comes to him to calm him down. It's hard for him without his mother. Luke and John go to prison to visit their mother. On the way, Luke complains to his father that his friend says nasty things about his mother. No one even knows what really happened. When they come on a date with Laura, he begins to behave very withdrawn, completely unresponsive to his mother. Laura sits down with John and asks about their affairs. John doesn't waste a minute trying to get his wife out of prison. Not so long ago, he filed an appeal and is sure that this time everything will be reviewed and Laura will be released. She is very worried that nothing will work out and even jokes about the fact that John should have become governor to lift the ban on conjugal visits, otherwise she will not last here for the next 20 years. And indeed, the guard controls their every move and has the right to end their date if they touch each other. So, one terrible morning took away two of the most valuable things in her life, a loving husband and a young son. But John promises that it will all be over soon. Luke grows up to be a very reserved child. On the playground, he meets a girl named Carrie, whose mother was sitting right next to John. They looked at each other with a smile on their face. John does not let the events of that night out of his head, trying to figure out what could have really happened. Someone came up, hit the girl in the face with a fire extinguisher and disappeared. John arrives at the courthouse and finds out that his appeal has been rejected and new evidence will not be raised. The lawyer says that the case is rubbish, but John is not going to give up even in such a deplorable situation and wants to appeal to the Supreme Court. The lawyer warns him that the court has not considered murder cases for about 30 years, but they will still try. The lawyer also asks John to look at the evidence, discarding the fact that she is his wife, because someone saw her leaving, and the victim was Laura's boss, whom she just complained about at dinner. But it happened right before dinner, so it's either a crazy coincidence, or Laura is a psychopathic killer, which John will never believe. The lawyer asks John to come to his senses and not to file papers anywhere, directly telling him that Laura will be in prison for her entire term. John comes to her in prison with tears in his eyes, without having time to say a word. Laura understands everything, and they silently cry and look at each other. Laura leaves in tears. John goes home, where his brother and parents are waiting for him. He gets a call with the news that Laura tried to commit suicide in prison, and she was brought to the hospital. They don't want to let John in for a long time, but he insists on his own and is allowed to see Laura for 2 minutes. In his lesson, John talks about Don Quixote, drawing parallels between his life. Faith in virtue is more important than virtue itself. What can we control in our lives? Can we exist in a world that we invented ourselves, and is it not better than despair? John finds a man who escaped from prison 7 times and interviews him about how he did it. He talks directly about how it can be done, literally dictating instructions to John. But before deciding on this risky step, you need to think carefully about everything. This does not frighten John at all, and the man leaves, taking the money from our hero's wallet. Gradually, John begins to create a whole escape plan for Laura. He is looking for the very keys in prison that could be used, devoting all his free time to this. With money, everything is also simple. He will sell the house. John buys pills from a dealer Moose and simultaneously asks about buying a passport. He first sends it, but then directs it to one of his acquaintances. John takes the money and goes there without a second thought. It turns out to be a setup. He is beaten by a Moose together with an accomplice and the money is taken away. John comes to his mother and tries to somehow justify his beatings by standing up for Laura's honor, but is faced with a lack of faith in her innocence. No one seems to believe in Laura's innocence anymore. Two motorcyclists, who have been following John since the bar, come to his house themselves. One of them is a deaf mute. The guy says he can help and asks for $3,700 for all services. John agrees, and a little later he notices the second one watching him in the window. John buys a gun without even knowing how to use it. The motorcyclist hands him the documents and says that with such a serious desire to escape, he will definitely fail the case. John studies the divisive locks with the help of YouTube and tries to create his own universal lockpick. He goes on a date with Laura and simultaneously checks the work of his own lockpick, but accidentally breaks it and leaves it in the lock. He gets away with this oversight and is reminded of what can happen to his son if he goes to prison, because everything is clearly visible on the cameras. One of the people on the way out notices John getting sick and throwing up. Since then, he has been following John and believes that he is going to organize an escape. John is sitting on the playground again with Luke, who is playing with the same girl. This time the girl's mother meets John. Her name is Nicole. It feels like Nicole cares about him. She keeps trying to figure out where Luke's mother is. After John tells the truth, she is shocked. John keeps an eye on the ambulance, which contains documents about patients with diabetes. He fakes papers about Laura's health and she is transferred to another place. There are the last 3 days before the events at the very beginning. John is unable to sell the apartment, and yet he has only $1,500 left. It's too little to escape. He goes to rob a small bank, wearing a cap and glasses for disguise, taking a gun with him. But he doesn't dare to get out of the car. It's too hard for him. When he tries to drive away, he does not notice a woman with a child, and almost knocks them down, but reacts in time. During one of the dates, Laura scolds John for trying so hard to free her from prison, forgetting about everything. For the fact that he lives in some kind of his own world, where she can still be released. At the end, she tells John that he never asked if she killed her boss, and this is his puncture. Laura leaves, leaving John with a big stone on his soul. But he returns and tells her into the phone that he did not believe her words and promises that he will save Laura and get her out of prison. John follows the red car of the dealer and goes directly to the supplier. He breaks in with a gun and takes some of the money, but it's not enough and he asks for more. The supplier says he doesn't have the guts to kill anyone and John shoots him in the leg. John sets fire to the house, after which the supplier runs away, but John manages to shoot him and the dealer. He finds a bag of money on the floor and leaves. John takes the drug dealer with him because he doesn't want to die on the floor of some brothel with a bullet in his body. That's how the movie started. The man asks to be taken to the hospital. He says he can't breathe and gradually suffocates until finally he falls silent. John leaves his corpse on the street. A few hours later, the police have already arrived at the place of the brothel, and are studying the crime scene. At this time, John's father finds plane tickets in his son's pocket and immediately understands what's what. Without further ado, he understands everything and only hugs John tightly for the last time. They'll be leaving soon and packing up. John breaks up his escape plan and throws out the trash. He didn't even notice that a piece of his headlight had broken off during that raid on the hangout, which is what the police used to investigate. The same policeman who caught John at the lockpick that time, in a hurry, demands to know John's home address. Meanwhile, Laura is being taken by ambulance to the hospital, as John has changed her blood composition and cut the wires to communicate with the hospital to check whether it is true or not. And he himself is going for an ambulance. Meanwhile, the investigator arrives at John's house and notices traces of his investigation. He sends his colleague to get a warrant while he studies the evidence. His colleague says that Laura is being transferred to another hospital. The man calls to find out what the situation is and says he will arrive in 10 minutes. After the policeman on the other end of the line hangs up, John in a doctor's suit pulls out a gun and asks the police to put their hands behind their heads. Laura is shocked by what is happening and asks John to calm down. At this time, a police car is already driving towards them at full speed. A woman from prison comes to the hospital herself and asks about the patient she brought. At this time, the police are already in the parking lot and one of them notices a broken headlight on John's car. John and Laura themselves, dressed as paramedics, run into the elevator, but they are noticed and reported about the escape. At the next elevator stop, they meet the policeman himself, but John points a gun at him and closes the elevator, despite the policeman's warning that all entrances are guarded and they will be killed. In the elevator, Laura is crying from stress, but John kisses her and asks her to calm down. He leaves a false trap, his white coat in another parking lot, and he runs with Lara through another exit and changes into the clothes of the tour group right on the move. Everything is carefully thought out, but the investigator turns out to be as cunning as John and notices them right in the subway. The man asks to block all trains and runs right behind the train in which John is sitting. All the helicopters and police cars arrive at the place where they were supposed to get to, but John makes an emergency stop and drives the first car he sees right from there, changing clothes on the go. He drives past the most dangerous intersections, ignoring all passing cars. The investigator gives a decree to raise the city, close the train stations and all stations, as well as find out where the child they are going for is now, but they went to the zoo and never returned. This will happen only in an hour. John finds out the address of the zoo and moves out for his son without wasting a second. An investigation begins against John and indeed, they search even his garbage bags. They do not fit in time to escape from the state and they have to leave Luke. Lara reacts very sharply to this and tries to jump out of the car, but John immediately grabs her and holds her tightly, not allowing his beloved to fall. She sits down, leaning on the car, he sits down next to her and their hands join. John's faith flares up with renewed vigor and they get into the car, but this time Lara's door will be closed. John still goes to the zoo and picks up Luke, thanking Nicole for looking after her son. Now the whole family is together. It remains only to leave the state. John changes clothes again, and now they look like a decent family. Nicole notices Lara sitting in the car and is surprised. The radio reports that everything is blocked, including the train station. What then remains? Nothing, except how to go to the train station. Meanwhile, one of the policemen brings a garbage bag with photos of the entire investigation to the department. They try to match the scrap to the scrap while the chief investigator turns the coin found in John's house. At this time, John passes through customs. He cheated. He took an elderly couple at the train station, under the pretext of giving them a ride along the way, thereby deceiving all the orientations on them. The investigator asks to send their photos to all cities within a radius of 500 kilometers, while John passes customs control with his family. At this time, the investigator interrogates John's parents to understand where they are going. The slightest call and they will be arrested. Meanwhile, their faces are found on the cameras at the train station. Workers run around with a poster showing the faces of John and Lara and ask them to stop the landing. But it turned out that it was an airport. John's father knew they were going to Venezuela and didn't tell the police anything. They stay in a hotel, and now they are waiting for a happy family life. John looks in the mirror and smiles. One of the investigators is trying to check Lara's case again and wants to find the same button, the fall of which she heard before the murder. He doesn't find her, but we can see her hiding and then falling. Now we know for sure that Lara is not guilty, but the police, it seems, will never find out about it. John takes pictures of his wife and son. He still can't believe that he succeeded.